Part V. Requirements on sanitation and food safety for domestic inter-island vessels, port or airport terminal, and food service establishments. Section 47, Sanitation and Food Safety Bureau shall take all necessary steps to ensure the maintenance of a sanitary environment within the domestic ports and airports, including the supervision and control of the sanitation of inter-island vessels, food service establishments, and terminals in coordination with the port or airport and shipping authorities. These measures are in line with the provisions of P.D. 856, otherwise known as the Sanitation Code of the Philippines, particularly Chapter XV Port, Airport, Vessel, and Aircraft Sanitation. 47. Point to sanitary facility requirements of inter-island vessels. 47.2.1 Provide adequate and proper storage of potable water aboard ship with sanitary safeguards from the shore water distribution system. 47.2 Adapt the good manufacturing practices (GMP) for food safety and sanitation on board ship. 47.2.3 Provide hand washing and toilet facilities and approved sewage disposal and drainage system. 47.2 Provide adequate and safe accommodation facilities for crew and or passengers. 47.2.5 Provide of sanitary storage and approved waste disposal system. 47.2.6 Maintain pests and vermin control. 47.3.1 Comply with the local ordinances regarding the structural setup of the terminal in accordance with the National Building Code of the Philippines P.D. 1096. 47.3. To provide sanitation facility requirements of food handlers working in the terminal. 47.3. For comply with the requirements of drinking water supply in accordance with the Philippine National Standards for Drinking Water. Supply in accordance with the Philippine National Standards for Drinking Water. Waste and sewage disposal. Vermin abatement program in the buildings and premises. Section 48. Food safety requirement for 8.1 Enhance the provision of sanitation and food safety in the area of responsibility at both domestic and international ports and airports of entry, including in-flight catering, food service establishments, vessels, and aircraft. 48.2 Adopt the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points HACCP audit system in monitoring the food safety program implemented at the area of responsibility. 48.3 Ensure mandatory compliance of the Good Manufacturing Practice GMP Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points HACCP provisions and guidance values as standard for the assessment of the sanitary and quality of foods served by the food service establishment and in-flight catering points at ports and airports of entry, both domestic and international. 48.4 Comply with the physical medical examination of stewards and food handlers for the issuance of health certificate. Section 49. Monitoring and Evaluation Bureau of Quarantine shall conduct a methodical examination and review of procedures and records of the program or system with a detailed report of findings. Guidelines will be promulgated in establishing monitoring procedures and tracking system operations, deviation from the standard requirements, and establishment of records for use in verifications. Part 9. Requirements for cargoes and materials for medical transplant and research. Section 50. Regulations on importation and exportation of cargoes. 50.1 Cargoes that are considered to harbor vectors of infectious disease subject to the regulations, emerging disease, and or public health emergency of international concern. 50.1.1 Cargoes from plague-infected port that are vulnerable to harbor rats or fleas shall be fumigated prior to its unloading in the port. Gunny sacks or jute bags or cargoes wrapped with the same materials coming from plague-infected countries shall be fumigated prior to the release to the consignee unless covered by a valid fumigation certificate. 50.1. To other cargoes that may carry vector-borne diseases and or cargoes potentially exposed to diseases subject to the regulations, emerging disease and or public health emergency of international concern of public health concern shall be subject to quarantine measures. 50.2 Cargoes containing hazardous materials, radiological, biological, or chemical wastes, etc., are subject to stringent quarantine inspection and measures. Section 51. Regulation on importation and exportation of materials for medical transplant and research. 51.1 Organs or tissues of human origin, culture of bacteria or any live microbe or collection of organisms that may cause any disease to humans or any insect, animal, or plant and its byproducts, potentially capable of transmitting a disease to humans, shall not be admitted nor to be transported to or from the Philippines without a specific permit issued by the Director of Quarantine in coordination with concerned agencies such as veterinary, plant, fish, and wildlife. Quarantine. 51. To organs, tissues or specimens of human origin which are solely for medical or clinical research and are non-infectious shall secure a quarantine permit or clearance prior to its admission or shipment. These shall be accompanied by necessary documents or protocols secured from the Bureau of Food and Drugs Bsca. Part X. Clearance of Human Remains. Section 52. Regulations on clearance of human remains. 52.1 The admission of human remains into the country shall be governed by the following regulations. 50.1.1 All human remains arriving at Philippine ports and airports coming from foreign countries shall be accompanied by the following documents for quarantine clearance. A. Death certificate or a true copy thereof, with proper translation, certified by the appropriate authorities from the country of origin. B. Certification from the consul at the country of origin. B. Certification from the consul at the country of origin. C. Certification that there is no existence of a pestilence from the health authority of the country of origin. D. Embalming certificate. Street, adding that the human remains have been properly embalmed and placed in a hermetically sealed, airtight, and waterproof casket. E. Cremation certificate stating that the human remains have been properly cremated and the ashes shall be placed in a hermetically sealed urn or a similar container. 52.1 To death caused by a highly pathogenic organism, infectious disease subject to the regulations, emerging disease and/or public health emergency of international concern. The remains may be issued quarantine clearance under the following conditions. The remains should be cremated before shipment, in case of the grave public health threat posed by the disease. B. For other cases that need no cremation, the casket should remain permanently sealed from the port of origin, and burial must take place within 24 hours after issuance of clearance of admission into the country. 52. To human remains for transport to foreign or domestic ports shall secure a quarantine permit before shipment with the following documents. 50.1 Death certificate or a true copy thereof. 52.2 Embalming certificate stating that the human remains have been properly embalmed and placed in a hermetically sealed, airtight, and waterproof casket. 50.3 Cremation certificate stating that the human remains have been properly cremated and the ashes shall be placed in a hermetically sealed urn or a similar container.